to do it.
Oh,
And then the Stormlands are going to want to do it. And then... And then everybody's just going to want to be their own king.
But that's done and gone. Everyone already wants to be their own king. There's like 5 kings.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
Catelyn. Her son's crown was fresh from the forge, and it seemed to Catelyn Stark that the weight of it pressed heavy on Robb's head. The ancient crown of the Kings of Winter had been lost 3 centuries ago, yielded up to Aegon the Conqueror when Torrhen Stark knelt in submission. What Aegon had done with it no man could say. Lord Hoster's smith had done his work well, and Robb's crown looked much as the other was said to have looked in the tales told of the Stark kings of old, an open circlet of hammered bronze incised with the runes of the first men, surmounted by 9 black iron spikes wrought in the shape of long swords. Of gold and silver and gemstones it had none. Bronze and iron were the metals of winter, dark and strong to fight against the cold. As they waited in Riverrun's great hall for the prisoner to be brought before them, she saw Robb push back the crown so it pressed upon the thick auburn mop of his hair. Moments later he moved it forward again. Later he gave it a quarter turn, as if that might make it sit more easily upon his brow. It is not an easy thing to wear a crown, Catelyn thought, watching, especially for a boy of 15 years. When the guards brought in the captive, Robb called for his sword. Olyvar Frey offered it up hilt first, and her son drew the blade and laid it bare across his knees, a threat plain for all to see. "Your Grace, here is the man you asked for," announced Sir Robin Rygar, captain of the Tully household guard. "Kneel before the king, Lannister," Theon Greyjoy shouted. Sir Robin forced the prisoner to his knees. He did not look like a lion, Catelyn reflected. This Sir Cleos Frey was a son of the Lady Jenna, who was a sister to Lord Tywin Lannister, but he'd none of the fabled Lannister beauty, the fair hair and green eyes. Instead, he'd inherited the stringy brown locks, weak chin and thin face of his sire, Sir Aemon Frey, Lord Walder's second son. His eyes were pale and watery, and he could not seem to stop blinking, but perhaps that was only the light. The cells below Riverrun were dark and damp, and these days crowded as well. "Rise, Sir Cleos." Her son's voice was not as icy as his father's would have been, but he did not sound a boy of 15 either. War had made a man of him before his time. Morning light glimmered faintly against the edge of the steel across his knees. Yet it was not the sword that made Sir Cleos Frey anxious. It was the beast. Greywind, her son had named him. A direwolf large as an elk-hound, lean and smoke-dark, with eyes like molten gold. When the beast padded forward and sniffed at the captive knight, every man in the hall could smell the scent of fear. Sir Cleos had been taken during the Battle of the Whispering Wood, where Grey Wind had ripped out the throats of 6 men. The knight scrambled up, edging away with such alacrity that some of the watchers laughed aloud. "Thank you, my lord." "Your Grace!" barked Lord Umber the Great John, ever the loudest of Robb's northern bannermen, and the truest and fiercest as well, or so he insisted. He'd been the first to proclaim her son king in the north, and he would brook no slight to the honour of his new-made sovereign. "Your Grace," Sir Cleos corrected hastily. "Pardons." He is not a bold man, this one, Catelyn thought. More of a Frey than a Lannister, in truth. His cousin the Kingslayer would have been a much different matter. They would have never gotten that honorific through Sir Jaime's perfect teeth. "I brought you from your cell to carry my message to your cousin, Cersei Lannister, in King's Landing. You'll travel under a peace banner with 30 of my best men to escort you." Sir Cleos was visibly relieved. "Then I should be most glad to bring his Grace's message to the Queen." "Understand," Robb said, "I am not giving you your freedom. Your grandfather, Lord Walder, pledged me his support and that of House Frey. Many of your cousins and uncles rode with us in the Whispering Wood, but you chose to fight beneath the Lion Banner. That makes you a Lannister, not a Frey. I want your pledge, on your honour as a knight, that after you deliver my message you'll return with the Queen's reply and resume your captivity." Sir Cleo answered at once. "I do so vow." "Every man in this hall has heard you," warned Catelyn's brother Sir Edmure Tully, who spoke for Riverrun and the Lords of the Trident in the place of their dying father. "If you do not return, the whole realm will know you forsworn." I will do as I pledged, Sir Cleos replied stiffly. What is the message? An offer of peace. Robb stood, longsword in hand. Greywind moved to his side. The hall grew hushed. Tell the Queen Regent, if she meets my terms, I will sheathe this sword and make an end to the war between us. In the back of the hall, Catelyn glimpsed the tall, gaunt figure of Lord Rickard Karstark, shoved through a rank of guards and out the door. No one else moved. Robb paid the disruption no mind. Oliver, the paper, he commanded. The squire took his longsword and handed up a rolled parchment. Robb unrolled it. First, the Queen must release my sisters and provide them with transport by sea from King's Landing to White Harbour. It is to be understood that Sansa's betrothal to Joffrey Baratheon is at an end. When I receive word from my Castellan that my sisters have returned unharmed to Winterfell, I will release the Queen's cousins, the Squire Willem Lannister and your brother Tion Frey, and give them safe escort to Casterly Rock, or wherever she desires them delivered. Catelyn Stark wished she could read the thoughts that hid behind each face, each furrowed brow and pair of tightened lips. Secondly, my Lord Father's bones will be returned to us, so he may rest beside his brother and sister in the crypts beneath Winterfell, as he would have wished. The remains of the men of his household guard who have died in the service at King's Landing must also be returned. Living men had gone south, and cold bones would return. Ned had the truth of it, she thought. His place was at Winterfell. He said as much. But would I hear him? No. Go, I told him. You must be Robert's hand, for the good of our house, for the sake of our children. My doing. Mine. No other. Third, my father's great sword Ice will be delivered to my hand, here at River Run. She watched her brother Sir Edmure Tully as he stood with his thumbs hooked over his sword belt, his face as still as stone. Fourth, the Queen will command her father Lord Tywin to release those knights and lords bannermen of mine that he took captive in the battle on the Great Fork of the Trident. Once he does so, I shall also relieve my own captives taken in the Whispering Wood and the Battle of the Camps, save Jaime Lannister alone, who will remain my hostage for his father's good behaviour. She studied Theon Greyjoy's sly smile, wondering what it meant. That young man had a way of looking as though he knew some secret jest that only he was privy to. Catelyn had never liked it. Lastly, King Joffrey and the Queen Regent must renounce all claims to dominion over the north. Henceforth we are no longer part of their realm, but a free and independent kingdom, as of old. Our dominion shall include all the Stark lands north of the Neck, and in addition the lands watered by the River Trident and its vassal streams, bounded by the Gold Tooth to the west and the Mountains of the Moon in the east. "The King in the North!" boomed Great John Umber, a ham-sized fist hammering at the air as he shouted. "Stark! Stark! The King in the North!" Robb rolled up the parchment again. Maester Vyman has drawn a map, showing the borders we claim. You shall have a copy for the Queen. Lord Tywin must withdraw beyond these borders and cease his raiding, burning and pillage. The Queen Regent and her son shall make no claims to taxes, incomes, nor service from my people, and shall free my lords and knights from all oaths of fealty, vows, pledges, debts, and obligations owed to the Iron Throne and the houses Baratheon and Lannister. Additionally, the Lannisters shall deliver 10 highborn hostages to be mutually agreed upon as a pledge of peace. These I will treat as honoured guests according to their station. So long as the terms of this pact are abided with faithfully, I shall release 2 hostages every year and return them safely to their families. Robb tossed the rolled parchment at the knight's feet. These are the terms. If she meets them, I'll give her peace. If not... He whistled, and Greywind moved forward, snarling. I'll give her another Whispering Wood. "Stark!" the Great John roared again, and now other voices took up the cry. "Stark! Stark! King in the North!" The direwolf drew back his head and howled. Sir Cleos had gone the colour of curdled milk. "The Queen shall hear your message, your Grace." "Good," Robb said. "Sir Robin, see that he has a good meal and clean clothing. He's to ride at first light." "As you command, your Grace," Sir Robin Rygar replied. "Then we are done." The assembled knights and Lord Bannerman bent their knees as Robb turned to leave, Greywind at his heels. Oliver Frey scrambled ahead to open the door. Catelyn followed them out, her brother at her side. "You did well," she told her son in the gallery that led from the rear of the hall. "Though that business with the wolf was japery more befitting a boy than a king." Robb scratched Greywind from behind the ear. "Did you see the look on his face, mother?" he asked, smiling. "What I saw was Lord Carstark walking out." "As did I." Robb lifted off his crown with both hands and gave it to Oliver. "Take this thing back to my bedchamber." "At once, your grace." The squire hurried off. "I'll wager there were others who felt the same as Lord Carstark," her brother Redmuir declared. "How can we talk of peace while the Lannisters spread like a pestilence over my father's domains, stealing his crops and slaughtering his people? I say again, we ought to be marching on Harrenhal." "We lack the strength," Robb said, though unhappily. Edmure persisted. "Do we go stronger sitting here? Our host dwindles every day." "And whose doing is that?" Catelyn snapped at her brother. It had been at Edmure's insistence that Robb had given the River Lords leave to depart after his crowning, each to defend his own lands. Sir Mark Piper and Lord Carol Vance had been the first to go. Lord Jonas Bracken had followed, vowing to reclaim the burnt shell of his castle and bury his dead. And now Lord Jason Mallister had announced his intent to return to his seat at Seaguard, still mercifully untouched by the fighting. "You cannot ask the River Lords to remain idle while their fields are being pillaged and their people put to the sword," Sir Edmure said. "But Lord Carstark is a Northman. It would be an ill thing if he were to leave us." "I'll speak with him," Robb said. "He lost 2 sons in the Whispering Wood. Who can blame him if he does not want to make peace with their killers? With my father's killers." "More bloodshed will not bring your father back to us or Lord Rickard's sons," Catelyn said. "An offer had to be made, though a wiser man might have offered sweeter terms." "Any sweeter and I would have gagged." Her son's beard had grown in redder than his auburn hair. Robb seemed to think it made him look fierce, royal, older. But be it all know, he was still a youth of 15 and wanted vengeance no less than Rickard Carstark. It had been no easy thing to convince him to even make this offer, poor as it was. "Cersei Lannister will never consent to trade your sisters for a pair of cousins. It's her brother she'll want, as you know full well." She'd told him as much before, but Catelyn was finding that kings do not listen half so attentively as sons. "I can't release the Kingslayer, not even if I wanted to. My lords would never abide it." "Your lords made you king." "And they can unmake me just as easy." "If your crown is the price we must pay to have Arya and Sansa return safe, we should pay it willingly. Half your lords will like to murder Lannister in his cell. If he should die while he's your prisoner, men will say—" "That he well deserved it," Robb finished. "And your sisters?" Catelyn asked sharply. "Will they say they deserve their deaths as well? I promise you, if any harm comes to her brother, Cersei will pay us back, blood for blood." "Lannister won't die," Robb said. "Not one so much as speaks to him without my warrant. He has food, water, clean straw, more comfort than he has any right to. But I won't free him, not even for Arya and Sansa." Her son was looking down at her, Catelyn realized. Was it war that made him grow so fast, she wondered, or the crown they'd put on his head? "Are you afraid to have Jaime Lannister in the field again? Is that the truth of it?" Greywind growled as if he sensed Robb's anger, and Edmure Tully put a brotherly hand on Catelyn's shoulder. "Cat, don't. The boy has the right of this." "Don't call me the boy," Robb said, rounding on his uncle, his anger spilling out all at once on poor Edmure, who'd only meant to support him. "I'm almost a man grown and a king, your king, sir, and I don't fear Jaime Lannister. I defeated him once, I'll defeat him again if I must, only—" He pushed a fall of hair out of his eyes and gave a shake of the head. "I might have been able to trade the Kingslayer for father, but not for the girls." Her voice was icy quiet. "Girls aren't important enough, are they?" Robb made no answer, but there was hurt in his eyes. Blue eyes, Tully eyes she'd given him. She had wounded him, but he was too much his father's son to admit it. "That was unworthy of me," she told herself. "Gods be good, what is to become of me? He is doing his best, trying so hard. I know it. I see it. And yet, I've lost my Ned, the rock my life was built on. I could not bear to lose the girls as well. I'll do all I can for my sisters, Robb said. If the Queen has any sense, she'll accept my terms. If not, I'll make her rue the day she refused me. Plainly, he'd had enough of the subject. Mother, are you certain you will not consent to go to the twins? You would be farther from the fight, and you could acquaint yourself with Lord Frey's daughters to help me choose my bride when the war is done. He wants me gone, Catelyn thought wearily. Kings are not supposed to have mothers, it would seem, and I tell him things he does not want to hear. You're old enough to decide which of Lord Walder's girls you'd prefer without your mother's help, Robb. Then go with Theon. He leaves on the morrow. He'll help the Mallisters escort that lot of captives to Seaguard and then take ship for the Iron Islands. You could find a ship as well and be back at Winterfell within a moon's turn, if the winds are kind. Bran and Rickon need you. And you do not, is that what you mean to say? My Lord Father has little time enough remaining him. So long as your grandfather lives, my place is at Riverrun with him. I could command you to go. As a king, I could. Catelyn ignored that. I'll say it again, I would sooner you sent someone else to Pike and kept Theon close to you. Who better to treat with Balon Greyjoy than his son? Jason Mallister, offered Catelyn. Tytos Blackwood, Stevron Frey, anyone but Theon. Her son squatted beside Greywind, ruffling the wolf's fur and incidentally avoiding her eyes. Theon's fought bravely for us. I told you how he saved Bran from those wildlings in the Wolf's Wood. If the Lannisters won't make peace, I'll have need of Lord Greyjoy's longships. You'll have them sooner if you keep his son as hostage. He's been a hostage half his life. For good reason, Catelyn said. Balon Greyjoy is not a man to be trusted. He wore a crown himself, remember, if only for a season. He may aspire to wear one again. Robb stood. I will not grudge him that. If I'm king in the north, let him be king of the Iron Islands, if that's his desire. I'll give him a crown gladly, so long as he helps us bring down the Lannisters. Robb, I'm sending Theon. Good day, mother. Greywind, come. Robb walked off briskly, the direwolf padding beside him. Catelyn could only watch him go. Her son, and now her king. How queer that felt. Command, she'd told him back at Moat Cailin. And so he did. I'm going to visit father, she announced abruptly. Come with me, Edmure. I need to have a word with those new bowmen Sir Desmond is training. I'll visit him later. If he still lives, Catelyn thought, but she said nothing. Her brother would sooner face battle than the sick room. The shortest way to the central keep where her father lay dying was through the Godswood with its grass and wildflowers and thick strands of elm and redwood. A wealth of rustling leaves still clung to the branches of the trees, all ignorant of the word the White Raven had brought to Riverrun a fortnight past. Autumn had come, the conclave had declared, but the gods had not yet seen fit to tell the winds and woods yet. For that Catelyn was truly grateful. Autumn was always a fearful time, with the spectre of winter looming ahead. Even the wisest men never knew whether his next harvest would be his last. Hoster Tully, lord of Riverrun, lay abed in his solar, with its commanding view to the east, where the rivers Tumblestone and Redfork met beyond the walls of his castle. He was sleeping when Catelyn entered, his hair and beard as white as his feather bed, his once portly frame turned small and frail by the death that grew within him. Beside the bed, still dressed in mail hauberk and travel-stained cloak, sat her father's brother, the Blackfish. His boots were dusty and splattered with dried mud. "Does Robb know you are returned, uncle?" Sir Brynden Tully was Robb's eyes and ears, the commander of his scouts and outriders. "No. I came straight here from the stables when they told me the king was holding court. His Grace will want to hear my tidings in private first, I think." The Blackfish was a tall, lean man, grey of hair and precise in his movements, his clean-shaven face lined and wind-burnt. "How is he?" he asked, and she knew he did not mean Robb. "Much the same. The maester gives him dream wine and milk of the poppy for his pain, so he sleeps most of the time and eats too little. He seems weaker with each day that passes." "Does he speak?" "Yes, but there is less and less sense to the things he says. He talks of his regrets, of unfinished tasks, of people long dead in times long past. Sometimes he does not know what a season is, or who I am. Once he called me by mother's name." "He misses her still," Sir Brendan answered. "You have her face. I can see it in your cheekbones and your jaw. You remember more of her than I do. It's been a long time." She seated herself on the bed and brushed away a strand of fine white hair that had fallen across her father's face. "Each time I ride out, I wonder if I'll find him alive or dead on my return." Despite their quarrels, there was a deep bond between her father and the brother he'd disowned. "At least you made your peace with him." They sat for a time in silence until Catelyn raised her head. "You spoke of tidings that Robb needed to hear." Lord Hoster moaned and rolled onto his side, almost as if he'd heard. Brynden stood. "Come outside. Best if we do not wake him." She followed him out onto the stone balcony that jutted three-sided from the solar like the prow of a ship. Her uncle glanced up, frowning. "You can see it by day now. My men call it the Red Messenger. But what's the message?" Catelyn raised her eyes to where the faint red line of the comet traced a path through the deep blue sky like a long scratch across the face of God. "The Great John told Robb that the old gods have unfurled a red flag of vengeance for Ned. Edmure thinks it's an omen of victory for Riverrun. He sees a fish with a long tail. In the Tully colours, red against blue." She sighed. "I wish I had their faith. Crimson is a Lannister colour." "That thing's not crimson," Sir Brynden said. "Nor Tully red, the mud red of the river. That's blood up there, child, smeared across the sky." "Our blood, or theirs?" "Was there ever a war where only one side bled?" Her uncle gave a shake of the head. "The Riverlands are awash in blood and flame all around the God's Eye. The fighting has spread south of the Blackwater and north across the Trident, almost to the Twins. Mark Piper and Carl Vance have won some small victories, and the southern lordling Beric Dondarrion has been raiding the raiders, falling upon Lord Tywin's foraging parties and vanishing back into the woods. It's said that Sir Burton Craighall was boasting he'd slain Dondarrion until he led his column into one of Lord Beric's traps and got every man of them killed." "Some of Ned's guard from King's Landing are with Lord Beric," Catelyn recalled. "May the gods preserve them." "Dondarrion and this red priest who rides with him are clever enough to preserve themselves if the tales be true," her uncle said. "But your father's bannermen make a sadder tale. Robb should never have let them go. They've scattered like quail, each man trying to protect his own, and it's folly, Cat, folly. Jonas Bracken was wounded in the fighting against the ruins of his castle, and his nephew Hendry slain. Tyto's Blackwood swept the Lannisters off his lands, but they took every cow and pig and speck of grain and left him nothing to defend but Raventree Hall and a scorched desert. Darry men recaptured their lord's keep, but held it less than a fortnight before Gregor Clegane descended on them and put the whole garrison to the sword, even their lord." Catelyn was horror-struck. "Darry was only a child." "Aye, and the last of his line, too. The boy would have brought a fine ransom, but what does gold mean to a frothing dog like Gregor Clegane? That beast's head would make a noble gift for all the people of the realm, I vow." Catelyn knew Sir Gregor's evil reputation, yet still. "Do not speak to me of heads, uncle. Cersei has mounted Ned's on a spike above the walls of the Red Keep and left it for the crows and flies." Even now it was hard for her to believe that he was truly gone. Some nights she would wake in darkness, half asleep, and for an instant expect to find him there beside her. "Clegane is no more than Lord Tywin's cat's paw." For Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, Warden of the West, father to Queen Cersei, Sir Jaime the Kingslayer and Tyrion the Imp, and grandfather to Joffrey Baratheon, the new crowned boy king, was the true danger, Catelyn believed. "True enough," Sir Brynden admitted. "And Tywin Lannister is no man's fool. He sits safe behind the walls of Harrenhal, feeding his host on our harvest and burning what he does not take. Gregor is not the only dog he's loosed. Sir Armory Lorch is in the field as well, and some sellsword out of Quahog who'd sooner maim a man than kill him. I've seen what they leave behind them. Whole villages put to the torch, women raped and mutilated, butchered children left unburied to draw wolves and wild dogs. It would sicken even the dead. When Edmure hears this, he'll rage. And that will be just as Lord Tywin desires. Even terror has its purpose, Cat. Lannister wants to provoke us to battle. Robb is like to give him that wish, Catelyn said, fretful. He's restless as a cat sitting here, and Edmure and the Greatjon and the others will urge him on. Her son had won 2 great victories, smashing Jaime Lannister in the Whispering Wood and routing his leaderless host outside the walls of Riverrun in the Battle of the Camps, but from the way some of his bannermen spoke of him, he might have been Aegon the Conqueror reborn. Brynden Blackfish arched a bushy grey eyebrow. More fool they. My first rule of war, Cat. Never give the enemy his wish. Lord Tywin would like to fight on a field of his own choosing. He wants us to march on Harrenhal. Harrenhal. Every child of the Trident knew the tales told of Harrenhal, the vast fortress that King Harren the Black had raised beside the waters of the God's Eye 300 years past, when the 7 kingdoms had been 7 kingdoms, and the Riverlands were ruled by the Ironmen from the islands. In his pride, Harren had desired the highest hall and tallest towers in all Westeros. 40 years it had taken, rising like a great shadow on the shore of the lake, while Harren's armies plundered his neighbours for stone, lumber, gold, and workers. Thousands of captives died in his quarries, chained to his sledges, or labouring on his 5 colossal towers. Men froze by winter and sweltered in summer. Weirwoods that had stood 3,000 years were cut down for beams and rafters. Harren had beggared the Riverlands and the Iron Islands alike to ornament his dream. And when at last Harrenhal stood complete, on the very day King Harren took up residence, King Aegon the Conqueror had come ashore at King's Landing. Catelyn could remember hearing old Nan tell the story to her own children back at Winterfell. And King Harren learned that thick walls and high towers are small use against dragons, the tale always ended, for dragons fly. Harren and all his line had perished in the fires that engulfed his monstrous fortress, and every house that held Harrenhal since had come to misfortune. Strong it might be, but it was a dark place, and cursed. I would not have Robb fight a battle in the shadow of that keep, Catelyn admitted. Yet we must do something, uncle. And soon, her uncle agreed. I've not told you the worst of it, child. The men I sent west have brought word back that a new host is gathering at Casterly Rock. Another Lannister army. That thought made her ill. Robb must be told at once. Who will command? Sir Stafford Lannister, it said. He turned his gaze out over the rivers, his red and blue cloak stirring in the breeze. Another nephew? The Lannisters of Casterly Rock were a damnably large and fertile house. Cousin, Sir Brynden corrected. Brother to Lord Tywin's late wife, so twice related. An old man and a bit of a dullard, but he has a son, Sir Davin, who is more formidable. Then let us hope it is the father and not the son who takes his army into the field. We have some time yet before we must face them. This lot will be sellswords, free riders, and green boys from the stews of Lannisport. Sir Stafford must see that they are armed and drilled before he dare risk battle. And make no mistake, Lord Tywin is not the Kingslayer. He will not rush in heedless. He will wait patiently for Sir Stafford to march before he stirs from behind the walls of Harrenhal. Unless, said Catelyn. Yes, Sir Brynden prompted. Unless he must leave Harrenhal, she said, to face some other threat. Her uncle looked at her thoughtfully. Lord Renly. King Renly. If she could ask help from the man, she would need to grant him the style he'd claimed for himself. Perhaps, the Blackfish smiled a dangerous smile. He'll want something, though. He'll want what kings always want, she said. Homage.
So Robb is finally coming of age and no longer needs his mama.
I know, it's pretty much doing the whole, Mom, stop it!
I can command you. I can.
I can send you home if I need to.
Yeah. That's, again, I know I've made this a point before, but I think it's really hitting me now. Westeros is being ruled, no matter where you are, by teenagers.
Yeah, pretty much. You have,
My God, the mood swings.
I know, the poor small folk.
Poor Lannister POW. Can't remember who it was because it's just some weird cousin no one cares about. Getting having to poop his pants in front of all of the Starks as Grey Wind moves towards him snarling.
Yeah. Cleos, right?
Cleos,
Cleos
yes.
Frey.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it was a Frey, that's right.
The guy who what wasn't he the messenger for Tywin in the last book? Cleos Frey?
I think
I'm
so.
pretty sure.
Yeah.
Now he's being sent back over to the Lannisters after he just rode all the way over to the Starks.
Yep.
And
that's
almost pooped his pants.
And then he
Poor
has
Cleos Frey. Now he's gotta go back over there.
He's gotta go back over there. And then he has to come back to go back to prison.
Yep.
Jeez.
Poor Cleos Frey.
Let's see how he ends up faring in this whole situation.
Right?
Telephone.
Yeah, I know, right? I think Catelyn is right though, in that there's no way Tywin's gonna agree to any of those terms.
No.
None whatsoever.
Even though I don't get why it's that big of a deal. Just give him the North.
Right, let him have it.
Like, we've learned that it's basically empty space for the most part. Well, at least above the neck.
Yeah.
It's just like farmland and stuff. I guess they get a lot of their food from there, probably.
There's probably certain things. Yeah.
But I doubt there's like a lot of money coming in from the North. Maybe there is. I don't know.
Economic.
We've kind of seen that, like,
the GDP of Westeros is never discussed, so we don't know what is imported and provided and from where.
It's not really discussed, but you can kind of.
But I mean, they never talk
assume.
about what was just shipped in from the North. You always hear things about like Dornish wine and blah blah blah.
That's what I mean.
You never hear about northern mince pies, or you know what I mean. There's not like they don't. So we don't know exactly what the economic value of the North is.
Exactly.
But I think it's less about that and more about, well, if the North does it, then the Reach is going to want to do it.
Well,
and then the Stormlands are going to want to do it. And then and then everybody's just going to want to be their own king.
That's done and gone. Everyone already wants to be their own king. There's like 5 kings.
Yeah, this is true. And
now Greyjoy might want a crown too.
Oh yeah, Balon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole thing. I think Catelyn is right on the money on that one. Don't send Theon. That's a terrible idea. What is Rob thinking?
That's like sending Jaime Lannister to deliver your message to Cersei.
Yeah, like, what are you doing? Well, I trust Theon. I wouldn't trust Theon. I don't know.
Every time we hear a description of Theon, Catelyn's talking about that sly smile and how you never know what he's thinking.
Right.
Was that sly smile because he knows that he's going to be sent and
I get to go back home?
I get to go home.
I don't know. I mean, Theon has literally been a hostage his entire life. Like,
that's true.
And he gets to go home. Maybe he will be loyal.
Maybe.
But
I mean, he was a hostage, but I think as far as being a hostage goes, being a hostage at Winterfell under Ned Stark's rule is not the worst place to be a hostage.
No.
They're honorable. They'll take care of you, and obviously Theon is doing pretty well for himself.
Well, right. I
mean, he still is a hostage. I mean,
that's what I mean. You're still a hostage, but I don't know. I think Catelyn at least is like, maybe send somebody who has the least possible chance of defecting.
Exactly. And who does she? And someone with more of a political mind.
All right, more diplomacy skills. Someone with some experience with this.
Exactly. Or at least, you know,
Especially since Balon Greyjoy has rebelled before, and
mhm.
Ned Stark did put him down with Robert. Like, there's personal bad history there. Like, what if Theon doesn't betray them and Balon is just like, no, you can't go back.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep you now that I've got you back. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Speaking of honorable people, I think Renly will join Robb in his quest to defeat the Lannisters.
I don't know.
Renly seems like a good guy. He might.
Renly does seem like a good guy. I feel like if anyone was gonna help Robb, it would totally be Renly. And I feel like he would be cool with honoring Robb's request.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I think he might push back a little bit. I mean, Robb did ask for a lot, so
Yeah. But maybe he'd at least give him the North.
yeah.
I don't know. Crowns do funny things to people.
Or I mean, right now, your biggest threat is going to be Tywin Lannister. He's in Harrenhal, which is basically impregnable.
Impregnable.
I can't say it right now. So yes, that word.
And also intimidating. I love the little history that Catelyn gives about the castle.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of get the background.
Defeat it with dragons. I wonder if that'll play in later.
Right? That's a good
Is that
question.
foreshadowing anything? And that's like not anything.
Will Harrenhal get burned to the ground twice?
Yeah, and that's not like anything that has arisen in these books in the end. So that's total speculation on my part too.
Yeah, we could still. That's still potential foreshadowing.
Yeah, the books haven't gone that far.
I know. I think.
So maybe.
I think Papa Lannister using Harrenhal is very smart. Not only is it a very hard castle to take, but it also has like that reputation where people are just like, "Ooh, Harrenhal, I want to go. I don't want to fight there."
So maybe.
There's the whole creepy, almost haunted factor about it.
So maybe our king, Sir Joffrey, will go hold up in there because she'll be like, it's just a bunch of Dothraki horsemen. They can't get in here. And then, boom, above dragons.
Oh, foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe not, though.
Maybe not.
Either way.
Catelyn sees it exactly for what it is, because she's like, yeah, my son is scared to go to Harrenhal.
Yeah.
He's a scaredy pants.
And again, if they didn't let their hubris and egos get in the way, probably the best decision is that they would just team up, take out Papa Lannister, and then hash out their disputes afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Renly is a much more potentially agreeable negotiator than Papa Lannister.
Even if they wanted to
shown
fight
himself to be kind of a negotiator. Like in the last book, he kind of showed himself to be.
Well, he spent time in King's Landing. He's been on the council, so he knows how the politics of things work.
Right. But he's in the last book. He was like right there with Ned, like wanting to do the right thing. I think when you look at it in hindsight, Renly offering him his swords and all of that.
Well, yeah.
So,
but he was smart enough to see what needed to be done and not the honorable way of things.
He was like, yo, this is what we need to do, and we need to do it right now. And Ned didn't take his advice, but I think it shows that Renly could potentially be negotiated with.
Oh, yeah.
But if this happens, if Renly decides to fight with Robb and they join forces against Papa Lannister, how's Stannis the Manus gonna feel about that?
Oh, he's gonna kill them all. Well, if he gets any bannermen, no one wants to help him, so.
I know.
Poor Stannis.
I know. I feel for him. I do. It's not a good time. It's having a rough
All
time.
he wants to do is play kickball, but not enough kids want to play.
I know. It's terrible. They all want to play with his younger brother.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I think Renly's better at Renly's a little better at politics, maybe, than Stannis.
Oh yeah, we've gone over this before.
I know.
Stannis is the man of war, and Renly is all about.
Was it this chapter? What? No, it was the Jon Snow chapter where the blacksmith that used to be the Baratheon blacksmith. He said Renly was copper, Stannis was iron, and I don't remember what he said Robert was. All steel, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. Basically, he was the best of them.
Yeah.
He was like the most well-rounded.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, before he became king, because then
he became king and then it all fell apart.
Being a king changes people.
That's right. So it'll be interesting to see how Renly reacts now that he's potentially a king.
Mm-hmm.
Even Robb is a little bit different. He's growing a beard now.
I know.
He's got a crown. I love the descriptions.
Manly.
I love the descriptions Martin gives of Robb constantly like messing with it, and it's uncomfortable, and as soon as he can take it off, he takes it off. He doesn't want to wear it. Like the physical representation of the weight and the heft of power and authority.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Crown weighs heavy.
And it's interesting that it's what is it, iron and bronze or something?
No gold
or filigree or any fanciness. No jewels.
Metals of the North.
Reforged crown of the kings of the North.
Yeah,
it's like
because
what the old crown used to look like.
The one Targaryen took it, and who knows what. It's probably crusted into the Iron Throne.
Yeah, could be. Aegon the Conqueror. Who knows what he did with it?
Right? I mean, that would have been a nice little touch on the Iron Throne, like on the seat, just have the crowns melted in.
I mean, if I were Aegon, that would make the most sense. Be like, yo, throw that in there too.
Exactly.
Aegon the Conqueror. What would Westeros be without him?
You know, that is a good question to kind of speculate. Would it be a better place or a worse place to be?
He did unite all the kingdoms.
That's what I mean.
And Harrenhal would still be standing.
Would it have... I mean, technically you didn't unite it. You just kind of put them under one rule, but there were still, like, all these lords, and they still banter and have fights and stuff, obviously. But would it have been better if everyone was just, like... You know, independent. And you get this area, you get this area.
If it was still 7 kingdoms.
Yeah.
7 separate kingdoms.
Yeah. You know, we never really learn about how it was before Aegon came over. We learn about the Heries of the Heries. I can't talk today. The history of Westeros as told by basically the Targaryens onward.
Yeah. The only prehistory we get are the things that like Maester Luwin has told Bran, like about the children of the forest
and the first men.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Would it have been a better place?
All we know is that the first men showed up, they were cool with the children, then the Andals showed up and they were not cool with the children. And then at some point, the Rhoynar came over and settled down in Dorne, and then thousands of years later, the Targaryens showed up
to burn it to the ground.
Yeah.
And meld it together in fire and blood.
Fire and blood. Yay! Love the Targaryens. They're my favorite. They're
great. Know who else loved the Targaryens? Tyrion Lannister. His love for dragons.
Did he love the Targaryens?
I don't know, but he really liked dragons.
He does really like dragons.
So I feel like he had to have appreciated them at least. In
Yeah,
that
there's
sense.
probably a few.
I
There's
mean,
probably a few Targaryens, like Aemon the Dragon Knight.
the only Targaryen that was alive in Westeros at the time, Tyrion was there, was the Mad King. So that kind of puts a bad taste in his mouth. But
I don't know. Rhaegar. Rhaegar would have been around,
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think.
Yeah, he would have.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
I guess they all would have been, but you know, he was the
He was a
very
king. Yeah. But Tywin or Tyrion, well, I don't know if Tyrion would have ever met them. I don't know if Tywin would have like allowed that or if he just kind of like kept him in a cupboard under the stairs kind of a situation for a while.
Maybe you're a wizard, Tyrion. We'll find out just how much of a wizard he is next time, because that's who we learn about.
Yeah, let's see how him and Cersei are getting along. This is such a beautiful start last time.